Valentine's Day was supposed to be Nate's grand masterpiece, a glamorous jazz lounge, a secret surprise, and the woman of his dreams on his arm. But from the second his phone buzzed with a suspicious cancellation, the night began to crumble. Every carefully laid plan threatened to unravel, and murky echoes of an old grudge loomed just out of sight. As more messages flood in, Nate realizes he's not merely battling bad luck. Someone wants this Valentine's celebration to crash and burn. Now he must confront the ghosts of his past before they destroy not only his perfect evening, but the new love he's just begun to cherish. Let's begin. Nate adjusted the collar of his crisp navy blue blazer as he stood outside Jazz and Company, a chic music lounge in the heart of Baltimore. The evening's winter air was sharp, but his excitement pulsed like electricity. He had meticulously planned the ultimate Valentine's surprise for his new partner, Ebony. She was everything he wanted: smart, compassionate, and apologetically herself. Nate, tall and solidly built, with deep brown skin and neatly cropped hair, exuded confidence. But deep down, he felt the weight of making this day absolutely perfect. In the pit of his stomach, though, a tight knot of uncertainty formed. His phone buzzed. Reservation canceled due to unforeseen circumstances. Confusion flickered across his face. Unforeseen circumstances, he murmured, scanning the message. Hadn't he confirmed the venue weeks in advance? His pulse sped up, and Ebony, with her warm, caramel-toned skin and graceful posture, arrived just in time to see his concerned expression. "Is everything okay?" she asked softly, hazel eyes reflecting genuine concern. Ebony was dressed in a flowing burgundy dress, her naturally curly hair pinned into a neat updo. The conversation had begun with hope for a perfect Valentine's date, but now tension weighed heavy in the chilly air. Nate forced a smile. "It's just a small hiccup," he lied. He felt an unsettling pit forming, pain creeping in. He had orchestrated a night of live jazz, catered dinner, and a romantic unveiling of a special gift. But the first glitch had already surfaced, threatening his carefully laid plans. He tried to push aside the dread, determined to salvage the evening. They entered Jazz and Company anyway, hoping to reason with the staff, only to find the place unexpectedly closed for emergency repairs. Ebony gently squeezed his hand in support, but Nate's mind raced with questions. This felt too strange to be a coincidence. Biting winter wind stung their faces as they retreated to his car. Why was everything unraveling? A swirl of pain returned. Nate recalled a fleeting memory from last year. Something about a messy end to a past relationship. But he shook it off, focusing on Ebony's reassuring presence. Even though anxiety gnawed at him, Ebony's easy smile sparked hope again. He wouldn't let one canceled reservation derail his grand plan. Yet, in the back of his mind, he couldn't ignore the echo of that memory. It involved Kayla, an ex he'd once hurt, albeit unintentionally. He'd posted an ill-timed social media quip, leading to viral embarrassment for her. Could that have any connection here? The question churned in his thoughts, but he dismissed it as paranoia. Valentine's was about love, not grudges. Nate's mind whirled as they drove downtown to find a backup dinner option. He kept refreshing his phone, trying to call the florist and the caterer he'd hired for the second phase of his Valentine's surprise. No luck. Every line was busy or went straight to voicemail. Ebony watched him with kind but worried eyes, noticing how his usually confident demeanor had cracked. "I've never seen you so tense," she admitted. Her voice had a soothing lilt that momentarily calmed him. Nate inhaled, wishing he could protect Ebony from any disappointment. This was supposed to be a celebration of how far they'd come together. Once they reached a cozy soul food restaurant, Sweet Harmony, They stepped inside to a swirl of savory aromas: smothered chicken, collard greens, fresh cornbread. The hostess recognized Nate from a recent visit and greeted them, but the warmth in her eyes flickered when her gaze landed on Nate's phone. "Sorry to interrupt, but I've been seeing some strange posts on social media," she said softly, looking at Ebony as if hesitant to speak. Nate's muscles tensed. The hostess continued, "Somebody named Kayla is tagging you in a series of cryptic messages. Something about Valentine's payback? I wasn't sure if it was a prank." Ebony's brows knitted. "Kayla? Who's Kayla?" Her gaze locked onto Nate, seeking an explanation. In that moment, Nate felt exposed. The memory from last year surfaced again, the humiliating viral post, Kayla's hurt face, and how she had sworn she'd never forgive him. He had messed up by taking their private argument public, inadvertently inviting the internet's mockery. Embarrassment and pain shot through him. He swallowed hard, deciding it was time for full honesty. "Kayla is an ex. Our breakup was messy," he said carefully. "I made a joke that went viral, and Kayla took it personally." Ebony's eyes widened with concern, but she said nothing, letting him continue. "I never intended to hurt her that way," he added, voice trembling. Nate's phone buzzed again, a new cryptic text from an unknown number. "You think one closed venue is all I've got planned? Just wait." A chill spread through him. Ebony gently placed a hand on his shoulder, her hazel eyes shadowed by unease. Something bigger was at play here, and Ebony felt it too. Determined not to let panic consume him, Nate guided Ebony toward a booth, hoping a comforting meal could steady their nerves. Yet the notion of Kayla orchestrating some elaborate sabotage tugged relentlessly at him. He had glimpsed Kayla's fiery temper before, but this felt meticulous, beyond raw emotion and more like a calculated plan. Ebony quietly squeezed his hand, sensing his turmoil. Over plates of fried catfish and collard greens, Nate revealed more about Kayla. She was a talented photographer he once dated. At first, she'd admired his ambition, and he'd adored her creative spark. But a single Valentine's Day misstep, his ill-chosen online post, escalated into a humiliating viral storm for Kayla. With it, their romance disintegrated. Nate never fully grasped how deeply it scarred her, nor did he try to mend the rift beyond a quick apology. Ebony rested her hand on Nate's, her hazel eyes heavy with empathy. "I wish you had told me," she said gently. "Maybe we could have prepared for something like this." Her words weren't accusatory. They brimmed with genuine concern. Nate appreciated her calm, yet he felt the ripple of pain inside. He should have confronted this past long ago. The tension spiked again when Ebony's phone chimed. She glanced at the screen, confusion knitting her brow. "That's strange," she muttered, reading the text. "You have no idea who Nate really is. And soon, you'll see why he doesn't deserve your trust." Ebony's heart pounded. She turned her phone to show Nate. The sender was an unknown number, but the message was laced with bitterness. That single text stung Nate's pride and triggered Ebony's protective instincts. She'd built a life valuing kindness and transparency. She mentored young dancers at a local community center, always preaching empathy. Yet now, she found herself doubting whether she truly knew Nate's heart. She studied his face, searching for answers beyond words. The restaurant's gentle hum of conversation provided a momentary shield from the chaos outside. When Ebony excused herself to visit the restroom, Nate stared at the phone message again. The resentment felt personal, intimate. Who else would know these details about him? Did Kayla have help? A flicker of realization crossed his mind. He had other exes who might share Kayla's anger. Over the years, his ambition and focus on success had led to casual breakups. He'd never considered the damage left in his wake. Perhaps Kayla had found them, united by a shared sense of betrayal. Nate's stomach clenched at the possibility of facing not one, but multiple scorned ex-partners. When Ebony returned, she wore a determined expression. "I'm with you," she said firmly, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. "But I need the truth. All of it." Nate nodded, steeling himself. It was time to connect the dots. The sabotage was real, and it was bigger than Kayla alone. Ebony's eyes pleaded for honesty, fueling Nate's resolve to come clean. He might have neglected the emotional wreckage he left behind, but if there was a time for redemption, it was now, especially if he wanted Ebony to believe in him. Dinner wrapped up with uneasy tension. As they stepped outside, a gust of cold air brought with it an unsettling sense of foreboding. Nate's phone buzzed with an unknown caller. He hesitated before answering. "Don't think I'm doing this alone," Kayla's voice hissed through the speaker. Before Nate could respond, a second voice chimed in, muffled but recognizable. Tiffany, an ex-girlfriend from 3 years ago. Nate's heart pounded in realization. Kayla hadn't just recruited 1 or 2 people. She had formed a network of ex-partners who felt wronged. They had joined forces, and each of them had played a role in toppling Nate's meticulously crafted Valentine's plans. The chaos he experienced tonight was just the first wave. "You wanted to humiliate me," Kayla snarled. "Well, guess how it feels when you're on the receiving end." With that, she hung up. Nate's blood ran cold. Ebony held his arm, sensing his panic. This was the major twist they never saw coming. An entire group of exes, each with their own reasons to see Nate falter. Ebony's eyes widened, flickering with sympathy and wariness. Did she truly know all of Nate's romantic history? Her mind raced back to the countless times she'd seen Nate shrug off the pain of old relationships with a casual wave of his hand. She recalled a conversation early in their dating. "Sometimes life moves on fast," he had said. But Ebony, raised to value empathy and treat people gently, always suspected feelings ran deeper than Nate admitted. At this juncture, Ebony felt a swirl of conflict inside her. She had always treated people with compassion, but was she enabling Nate by not pressing him earlier? Or was this situation purely a consequence of his past choices? Ebony resolved to see the truth through, no matter how painful. Determined not to let fear take over, Nate proposed they regroup at his apartment. They needed a secure place to think, plan, and possibly reach out to these exes. "If I confront them," Nate said, voice trembling, "maybe they'll see I've changed." On the way, Ebony's phone chimed again, another ominous text from an unknown number. "He might beg for mercy, but we won't stop until he learns." Ebony read it aloud, and Nate grimaced. A swirl of regret, guilt, and quiet terror settled over him. He glanced at Ebony, uncertain if she'd remain by his side. But she squeezed his hand, a silent promise of support, even as her own doubts festered. In the distance, city lights of Baltimore glowed, reflecting off the dark harbor waters. The night felt colder than ever. Nate's mind spun. What else had Kayla orchestrated? Was there a limit to this payback? Nate and Ebony arrived at Nate's cozy apartment, a well-kept space in a refurbished brick building. The living room walls bore framed prints of jazz musicians, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, a nod to Nate's love of music. Tonight, however, the once inviting space felt charged with unease. Ebony dropped her coat on the couch, her hazel eyes scanning the room, taking in details of Nate's world. She noticed a cluster of photos from his college days. In some, he stood beside various women, friends, possibly old flames. Her heart twinged at the possibility that some of these smiling faces might now be part of Kayla's alliance. Nate paced the floor, phone in hand, pulling up contact information for his exes. "I need to figure out who's in on this," he muttered. A wave of guilt weighed him down. He never anticipated that half a dozen breakups, each seemingly minor to him, could harbor such deep resentments. Ebony watched him carefully, torn between sympathy and a mounting sense of you should have known better. Finally, he tapped the contact labeled Tiffany. Voicemail. Another call. "Denise." Straight to voicemail. A text to Brianna went unanswered. It was as though each woman had coordinated to keep him in the dark. Ebony gently laid a hand on his shoulder. "Maybe charging in with calls isn't the solution," she said softly. "We should approach this with understanding instead of panic." The memory of Kayla's voice echoed in Nate's head. "Guess how it feels." He thought back to the day he posted that hurtful joke at Kayla's expense. He winced, remembering how quickly it gained traction, how it spiraled out of control. He'd never apologized publicly or offered any real amends. He just moved on. Now the emotional debris was colliding with his new life. The two settled on the couch. Ebony, ever the empathetic soul, proposed a different tactic. "If Kayla and these women are determined to sabotage you," she reasoned, "they might relish any sign of desperation. What if we step into their perspective? Really understand what you did to hurt them. If you show genuine regret and try to make amends, maybe they'll back off." Nate's voice wavered with pain. "I never meant to hurt anyone. But I guess I never truly listened or tried to fix what I messed up." He inhaled sharply. This confrontation of his own demons scared him more than any external threat. Yet Ebony's idea sparked a new sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, Kayla and the others would see sincerity if Nate put in the work. He typed out a thoughtful message to Kayla, acknowledging her pain, stating he was open to dialogue. He sent it, heart pounding. Then he took a deep breath and looked at Ebony. "No more hiding," he said. "They need to hear my apology." Time passed slowly that evening. Nate's heartfelt message to Kayla remained unanswered, fueling a knot of anxiety in his chest. Ebony brewed a pot of peppermint tea, hoping to calm their nerves. They sat at the small kitchen table, silent phones lying between them like ticking time bombs. Finally, a notification buzzed. Nate pounced on his phone, breath unsteady. The reply wasn't from Kayla, but from Tiffany. "Save your apologies, Nate. Too little, too late." Another message pinged in almost simultaneously, this one from a new number. "We want you to feel powerless, just like you made us feel." Ebony's brow furrowed. They're not interested in dialogue. They just want payback, she sighed. Nate's shoulders sagged. He had hoped they might see his remorse and end the sabotage, but they had no intention of letting him off the hook. Taking Ebony's advice, he decided to record a public video apology, trying to match the viral nature of his past humiliating post. He poured his heart out, acknowledging how he'd hurt people, how he'd been dismissive of their feelings, and how he wanted to set things right. He uploaded it, feeling a flicker of hope that sincerity might quell their anger. But within minutes, the video was flooded with mocking comments. Some claimed it was just damage control, not genuine remorse. Others posted screenshots of old texts and memes that painted Nate as insensitive or self-centered. Ebony winced as she read through them, her hazel eyes brimming with empathy and concern. She looked over at Nate, who was visibly shaken. He reached for her hand, but she pulled away slightly, an almost imperceptible movement, yet it spoke volumes about the tension between them. Phone calls started pouring in, from supportive friends, from Ebony's own circle, and from random onlookers chasing the drama. The plan was backfiring. Nate felt more exposed than ever. Ebony's eyes turned contemplative, her thoughts swirling with how she had always been careful about treating people kindly. Had she overlooked Nate's capacity for disregard because she was so captivated by his charm? The final blow of the night came in the form of a viral tweet from Kayla, retweeted by Tiffany and several other exes. "Don't be fooled. This is the same man who turned my Valentine's Day into a global joke. #no more excuses, #Valentine's payback." Accompanying it was a clip from his public apology, cut to make Nate look insincere. Out of context, it was devastating. Nate ran a hand over his face, his heart pounding in his chest. This wasn't just about saving Valentine's Day anymore. This was about preserving his integrity, his relationship, and the respect he desperately wanted from Ebony. Leaning forward, Ebony placed a hesitant hand on his shoulder. "It's not over yet," she whispered, though her tone held a note of uncertainty. "We need a new plan, something that shows real accountability." The next morning, sunlight crept through the apartment's thin curtains, illuminating Ebony as she scrolled through social media updates. Nate was still asleep on the couch, having barely shut his eyes after the barrage of attacks. Ebony took a moment to reflect on her own past. She'd always prided herself on empathy, organizing fundraisers, advocating for youth programs, ensuring every voice was heard. Yet now, she recognized that perhaps she'd never challenged Nate enough on his emotional blind spots. Determined, she left a note for Nate. "Went to find some answers. I'll be back soon." And quietly slipped out. Her first stop was a local coffee shop to meet a mutual acquaintance who once dated Nate's friend. Word had gotten around about the meltdown swirling around his Valentine's plan. Over steaming lattes, Ebony gently probed for details about how Nate's exes had connected. It turned out Kayla had started a private group chat months ago, slowly gathering women who had felt dismissed, hurt, or belittled by Nate. They didn't necessarily want him destroyed, but they did want him to understand the consequences of his actions. Kayla, however, fueled by her viral humiliation, seemed to be pushing everyone toward more drastic measures. Ebony's heart clenched at the sadness behind these stories. Despite their anger, these women had real wounds. She understood their pain, yet she also believed in Nate's potential to grow. Ebony realized that if Nate wanted redemption, he needed more than a public apology. He needed to face each person's hurt individually, acknowledge it, and actively work to repair it. Meanwhile, at the apartment, Nate awoke to silence and the weight of dread. Finding Ebony's note, he felt a pang of gratitude. She was still with him, helping him piece his life back together. Anxiety churned in his gut. Would her efforts make any difference? Upon Ebony's return, the two conferred over an impromptu breakfast of cereal and fresh fruit. She relayed what she learned, how Kayla had become the ringleader, how she leveraged shared pain to rally support. Ebony suggested meeting each ex in person if possible. "They need to feel seen," she said, voice trembling with earnestness. "Hiding behind social media isn't enough anymore." Nate exhaled slowly, absorbing every word. He realized Ebony was right. Making amends wasn't supposed to be easy. He glanced at the clock, noting how the big night, his supposedly epic Valentine's surprise, was looming. The sabotage had already decimated his original plans, but perhaps there was a chance to rebuild something genuine. "I'll do it," he said, his voice firm. "I'll talk to them, one by one, if they're willing." Ebony nodded, a glimmer of hope in her hazel eyes. The path forward seemed daunting, but it was better than wallowing in guilt and fear. Armed with Ebony's encouragement, Nate started making calls. The first ex he actually reached by phone was Denise, a former classmate from grad school. Reluctant at first, Denise eventually agreed to meet at a public park. Nervous energy coursed through Nate as he arrived at a lakeside trail. Ebony waited in the car, giving him space but ready to step in if he needed support. When Denise approached, Nate's heart pinged with regret. She wore a gray wool coat, her expression guarded, posture rigid. Denise was one of the kindest people he'd known, until he ended things abruptly, never explaining why. He swallowed hard, determined to face his mistake head-on. "I'm sorry," he started, voice trembling. "I ended things so callously. I was too busy chasing my goals to see how much I hurt you." Denise's eyes glimmered with newly formed tears. The sound of water lapping at the shore underscored the rawness of the moment. After a pause, she spoke. "Do you know how it feels to be dismissed as if your feelings never mattered?" Her voice cracked. Nate felt that wave of guilt crash over him again. He admitted he never truly acknowledged her pain. Slowly, Denise softened, recognizing that maybe his remorse was real. While she didn't promise instant forgiveness, she thanked him for speaking face to face. Emboldened by this partial breakthrough, Nate moved on to a local cafe to meet Brianna, an ex from his early career days. She arrived with a tense smile, arms crossed protectively over her chest. Nate repeated his apology, recounting how he had neglected her in favor of late-night work sessions. To his surprise, Brianna opened up about the emotional toll it took on her self-esteem. Seeing Ebony waiting discreetly nearby offered him solace. This process of confronting old wounds, acknowledging them, and listening to each ex's side was draining. But each conversation ended with a sense that real healing, no matter how small, was happening. Ebony watched, her own reflections swirling in her mind. She had spent her life treating others kindly, but only now did she see how important it was for Nate to fully mirror that compassion. The day stretched late into the afternoon. As they drove back, Ebony touched his arm gently. "I'm proud of you," she whispered, eyes soft with understanding. "But there's still Kayla. She's the one who set everything in motion, and she's the one who feels the deepest betrayal." Nate nodded. The sense of hope he'd built from these smaller reconciliations carried him forward. "I just need to find Kayla before she escalates this even more," he replied, voice determined. The biggest challenge, confronting Kayla's heartbreak, remained, and the clock on Valentine's Day was ticking. After arranging a meeting through one of Kayla's acquaintances, Nate and Ebony found themselves on a deserted rooftop parking garage, the Baltimore skyline illuminated by amber streetlights. A chill wind swept through the concrete expanse as Kayla emerged from the far side, her face set in a steely glare. Kayla, an African-American woman in her late 20s, wore a stylish leather jacket, her expression a volatile mix of anger and hurt. The moment she laid eyes on Ebony, her features twisted with bitterness. "So, this is who you're trying to impress now, Nate," she spat, voice echoing off the concrete walls. Ebony braced herself, meeting Kayla's gaze without flinching. Nate's heart pounded in his chest. He stepped forward, arms open in a sign of contrition. "Kayla," he began softly, "I know I messed up. Badly. The viral post. I should have taken it down. Should have done something more than a half-hearted text. I'm sorry," Kayla scoffed. "It's easy to say sorry now that your grand Valentine's plan is ruined." She glanced at Ebony, eyes glinting with pain. "You don't know what it was like, seeing thousands of likes and cruel comments. I was made into a joke for the world to see." Ebony stepped in carefully. "Kayla, I don't pretend to understand the depth of your hurt, but I can see it was real," she said, voice trembling with empathy. "Nate is trying to make amends. I'm not here to make excuses for him." Ebony's own experiences, where she'd always tried to treat people with respect, fueled her compassion. Yet she also wanted Kayla to see a path toward closure. Kayla narrowed her eyes, tears threatening to spill. "Do you have any idea how this haunted me? How it affected my career, my reputation as a photographer? Clients canceled on me. People recognized me in public, all because of that one post." Her voice broke and the echo reverberated into the silent night. Nate lowered his gaze, acknowledging the weight of his actions. "I was wrong," he repeated. "If there's anything I can do to make it right, financially, publicly, or anything, tell me. I'm done running from this." For a moment, Kayla seemed unsure. The raw pain in her eyes battled with the exhaustion from plotting revenge. She glanced at Ebony, who stood poised but compassionate, then back to Nate. "I wanted you to feel how I felt," she admitted in a trembling whisper. "I gathered everyone who knew your faults, who felt discarded, and for once you couldn't ignore us." A heavy silence stretched between them. In the distance, sirens wailed softly. Nate took a cautious step forward. "Kayla, let me fix what I can," he said, voice tight with sincerity. "Let me publicly set the record straight, support your work, and do whatever it takes to heal. I can't erase the past, but I can do better now." Kayla let out a shaky breath, her posture loosening a fraction. Under the city lights, the tension slowly eased as Kayla fought back tears. Ebony stepped closer, arms extended in a peaceful gesture. "You have every right to be angry," she affirmed gently, her hazel eyes shining with sincerity. "This doesn't have to end in constant retaliation, though. We can find a real resolution." Kayla crossed her arms, letting out a long sigh. In her mind, she replayed the hurt, the mocking comments online, the cruel memes. Finally, she nodded, though her expression remained guarded. "You want to fix this?" she asked Nate. "Then do it publicly. Admit what you did, name me, apologize openly. Tell your new fans and followers who I really am, a person you wronged who deserves respect." Nate nodded, hardly believing she'd give him an opportunity to make amends. "I will, I promise." He slipped out his phone, heart hammering. Standing there on the rooftop with Ebony and Kayla watching, he went live on his social media. His voice cracked as he confessed to his followers how his careless post had hurt Kayla and possibly others. He detailed the sabotage that followed, explaining that it was a reaction to the deep pain he caused. He acknowledged each ex-partner, urging people to refrain from harassing them and instead to consider how words can wound. Ebony stood by, her hand resting gently on Kayla's arm, a silent bridge between them. For a moment, they all felt a semblance of release. This public reckoning wasn't polished or glamorous, but it was raw and honest. When Nate ended the live feed, Kayla stood silent, tears shining on her cheeks. "I never wanted to be your enemy," she whispered. "I just needed you to see me as a human being, not a punchline." Nate took a trembling breath. "I see you now," he said. With the tension lifted, Kayla stepped back, exhaustion etched in her features. "I hope your Valentine's plan for Ebony works out," she murmured. "Just treat her better than you treated me." Then, with the faintest of nods at Ebony, she left, disappearing down the concrete ramp. Relief mingled with pain and a strange new hope. Nate turned to Ebony, whose eyes gleamed with pride and concern. "Is it over?" he asked, voice scarcely above a whisper. Ebony cupped his face, her tone soothing yet firm. "Not yet. You have a lot of healing to do, a lot of trust to rebuild. But this is a start." She pressed a soft kiss to his cheek. The night air felt gentler now. They descended to the car, uncertain what tomorrow would bring, but certain they had confronted the worst. Nate's Valentine's Day plan had been shattered, but out of the wreckage, he found a deeper sense of accountability, and possibly a more genuine love. Finally, he was prepared to face the past head-on, understanding the value of every human heart he'd once overlooked. If you enjoyed this twist-filled journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Stories by Lane for more unforgettable drama and surprises. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. Thanks for watching, and remember, twists you will not see coming await in every chapter.